I think the world has lost a great human being who have contributed so much.
Brent was involved in the intercommunity experience program almost from the very beginning, and I knew him when I started to get involved. He actually predated me in the program, and so I became the director of the program in about 1994, right? Yeah, around 1994. So that would be his like last year. He graduated in 94, so I got to know him that year. I guess maybe 1993, I got to get to know him. So I knew him for about a year. And he was just very involved in the program. And he was such a presence in the program that when I got involved, he was one of the members of the program I met early on. It was a program that was actually started by students who were, we had a student who was working, he had an Exxon summer internship, and he was working with Habitat Humanity in the Garrett Park neighborhood on Lois Greenville. And he saw that there were a lot of kids at risk in that neighborhood. It was, these were the days of the crack epidemic. Some of the kids were crack babies. It was just an at-risk neighborhood. And Habitat moved in early on. That was their first Dallas neighborhood, I believe. And we're, trying to help the families and trying to, restore a sense of community to that neighborhood. And so we built a house there, and SMU students lived there, and we would have events in our backyard. We would have tutoring at the house, open hours at the house where the kids could come in. If there were any, issues in the neighborhood, a lot of parents would come over. And we would run tutoring programs for the kids 5 days a week at Munger Place United Methodist Church, a block away. And we also taught classes. We taught SMU classes down at the church. And that's really one of the things that I was most involved in, is teaching classes down at the church, classes about, urban life, social issues, et cetera, classes that were relevant to the needs of the neighborhood.
We met at SMU. So I was a sophomore and he was a senior. He had just come back from studying abroad in London, and he was finishing up his senior year at SMU. And I was studying in the SMU Fondren library. I was always there studying. And he was there one day, and we saw each other from across the room, and he approached me, and we, met. And since then we've been friends and been hanging out and talking, and have gotten to know each other over the years. It's been about 29 years since we've known each other. I would say at the beginning, we weren't friends yet, right? We had just met, and I was, at the time, I guess was I in my 20s yet? Maybe 19, 18, 19, something like that. I was just like thinking, why would he want to talk to me? Kind of a thing, asking myself that. So it was, it meant something to me that he was interested in getting to know me and wanting to be my friend. And so I was just glad, to have met him at the time and to have a new friend.
He was just one of the kids who, or young men really, who he was tutoring the kids. He got to know the families. He was really involved, on the ground. I mean, he was really there in the neighborhood often, and he was just doing everything. I mean, he was just he was like a community activist. He was tutoring the kids. He was helping out families. He was just a real presence there. He really believed in the program, and he believed in what we were doing, and he had a real stake in the operations of the program. He cared deeply about its success. And it was just that level of commitment that, there were other students would come in and, they were interested, but they really weren't expressing that level of, I mean, there was something about the program that really hit home for Brent, I think. And I think it was also at the time in particular, I mean, the program was, you know, a kind of a home away from home for a lot of students who were looking for something beyond the usual college experience. And they really wanted to be involved in positive social change in the real world. So, you know, SMU had the reputation at the time, I don't know if it still does, of, you know, the bubble. You know, SMU is a bubble. And it was like, it was people like Brent who really pushed SMU to move beyond the bubble and get involved. I mean, you know, one of the things about our program, SMU these days calls itself, you know, Dallas's university and et cetera, et cetera. But at the time, SMU and Dallas were kind of separate from one another. And it was people like Brent who really pioneered bringing SMU into the Dallas community.
I mean, just the fact that he was interested in getting to know me, and I think that I felt like that because coming here as a refugee, and I actually have an alien card, you know, we were called aliens. I just didn't have a sense of myself, you know, or confidence at the time. And he asked good questions, and they were questions about who I was, and was just interested in getting to know me. So I definitely, he made me feel seen. And I don't remember all that he said at the time, but I definitely felt like it was a special connection. So we lived in the SMU ICE house together, and ICE stands for Inter-Community Experience. And we did all sorts of programs with the kids. The idea was to live among the kids in the neighborhood, right? So it was a habitat home that we were in. And, you know, I led the kind of computer literacy program, if you will. We also had an art program with them, also tutored them and got to know their families. Most of them didn't have their parents with them. They were living with a grandparent who was raising them. And I would say the fondest memory would probably be when Brent and I decided that we would start a soccer team with these kids. And, you know, we wanted them to, I guess, to be part of a team. You know, it wasn't part of any, I don't know if it was part of like a formal league. Maybe it was, because we had uniforms, you know, for them. And that was really fun. Just in addition to, you know, helping to guide them in their lives at such a young age, also having fun with them.
Well, yesterday I learned, I guess the news was out, but I guess I hadn't read the newspaper, but I got a text message from another former student, Thear Suzuki. Thear was very close with Brent, and I think she kept up with him. And she's very upset. They were very close.
So my family and I were on spring break vacation this past week in Colorado, and we took a 15-hour drive back home on Saturday. And we had gotten back home around midnight, you know, and went to bed, woke up the next morning, Sunday morning, and my best friend sent me a text of an article about Brent, and I was in total disbelief. I had known that he would be going and working dangerous places, and he had always come back. Of course, would always pray for him. I never thought in a million years that this war in the Ukraine would impact me this directly. We would text, you know, over the years, and for this year, he had texted me on my birthday and, you know, wished me a happy birthday, and he was in South America. And I had let him know that I would be in New York this week, and if he was there, it would be great for us to meet up. And he had let me know that he would be this week in the Congo and also in Sudan. But at the time, he didn't mention that he would be in Ukraine. I don't remember the exact date of those texts, but it must have been before Russia attacked Ukraine. And so I'm not surprised that he would be there, because he was working on a year-long global refugee crisis project. He had let me know that a while back. And so given the impact on the people, on the Ukrainian people, I'm not at all surprised that he's there. I was just shocked to learn that he wasn't going to come back from it.
My memories of Brett is that he, one of the things I liked about him is he had strong opinions, and which I think speaks to his level of commitment and belief in what he was doing. And that's in some ways, that's my biggest memory of him. He was just very committed to what he was doing. He had strong opinions about, he had high standards for himself, I think, in terms, and for others in terms of their level of commitment to the kids and to the program, because he was very serious about what he was doing. And I think that's in many ways, and he was a very compassionate person. I mean, he loved working with the kids. I think he was great with them. And he loved working with them. And I think it meant a lot for him to be around them and to feel that he was getting to know them, getting to know the families, and helping them.
He was definitely very kind and also very thoughtful. Like, he was not, your typical college student, as I would think about a typical college students at the time. He was very thoughtful. He was very, very worldly. He was very informed in terms of knowing what was going on in the world. And he was interested in social causes and helping people who are marginalized, or people who don't have the access or the opportunity for better education and for upward mobility. So those were the types of things that he would think about, and those are the types of things that we would talk about. And so we connected on those things, and I feel very grateful and blessed to have had the opportunity to have that experience with him. What was important to him was to tell the right stories, and he was he wasn't afraid to go into dangerous areas in order to capture the right footage, meet the right people, and tell the real stories of what's happening on the ground. I think he was driven by his purpose of bringing stories to the world that people needed to know about, and he wanted to do it in a way that was truthful and meaningful, and he wanted people to see the impact that the wars or the homelessness or the drugs were having on the people. And the places that he would go to and the links that he would go to, I mean, I think very few people would be willing to do that. And for him, he was just so convicted about doing this type of work. He cared so much about it.
My sense of him, I didn't keep up with him, and so I got this email, or I got this text message from Thear yesterday about this, and I just, I went into shock. Again, I didn't know about his career, so when I was reading about it, I mean, it just seemed thoroughly consistent with everything I knew about him, just in terms of his commitment to social justice, to his willingness to go, to places that, other people might consider too dangerous. I mean, believe it or not, the Garrett Park neighborhood was considered dangerous back in, and there were incidents there, back in the day. But he was a courageous person. He was courageous back then, and he expanded his, the breadth of his courage to be in Ukraine, for example. But he was, in many ways, he seemed like a fully formed. When I was reading about him yesterday, it just, everything made sense to me in terms of the path he pursued from what I knew about him when he was an undergraduate here, and I was just deeply impressed and, so saddened to hear this.
He was a very special person who cared about telling the truth, and he cared about people's lives, particularly those who are marginalized, and those who other people maybe are not seeing. And he wanted to tell their stories. He was a quiet person, a very thoughtful person, and someone who just really cared about people, and cared about telling the right stories, and would go to any lengths to bring it to the world. I think I lost a dear friend. I think about his family and how they must be feeling about this loss. I can't imagine. And I think the world has lost a great human being who have contributed so much. And I think his memories will live on in his work. His work is really powerful, and I hope that people will will just check out the stories that he and his brother and his colleagues have made available for all of us.